It's time for the Lowell Green Show, originating live on blasttheradio.com. Ask your smart speaker to play Blast the Radio. Live video available on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Email Lowell at blasttheradio.com. The number to call or text is 613-413-2217. And now, telling it like it is, here's Lowell Green.
Thank you, John. How are you enjoying the pandemic, the lockdowns? Having a good time in all of this, are you, John?
It's party central over here at Milky Manor. Oh, yeah. Not really.
You know, yeah, it's tough. You're locked in our homes, essentially, can't do what we would normally do, can't go out to restaurants. You were telling me about a friend of yours lost a mother. All you can have are
mom.
10 people at a funeral. They got 7 kids. I mean, the imposition, the businesses that are shut down, the dreams that are shattered. I mean, you know, masks, very unpleasant. But I mean, the fact is that 99% of us are doing what we are supposed to, thank God, or we'd have a situation like we have in India. But John, while we're doing all of this, while you and I and everybody out there almost are doing what we are supposed to, making all kinds of sacrifices, Trudeau is letting literally thousands of infected people into our country via airplanes. New figures out from Health Canada. I mean, we're doing all of this, making all of these sacrifices. People are being bankrupted, businesses shut down, dreams shattered, people losing their homes. While Trudeau, listen to this, lets in more than 5,000 infected people into our country in a 3-month period through our airports. According to Health Canada, so these are figures from the government itself. Listen to this. Between February 22nd of this year and April 29th, about 3-month period, a total of 5,159 infected people arrived at our airports. And incredibly, about 40% of them carried one of these new deadly mutations which are now spreading like wildfire across our country. How many more infected people arrived at our borders via land transportation? We have no idea. I don't think we will ever get a handle on that, but you can be sure it would be thousands more. I want you to think about that. Our Prime Minister and other leading Liberals have maintained steadily that international travel accounts for just a tiny fraction. Folks, in a 3-month period that we know of, more than 5,000 infected people arrived at our airports. Thousands more through the land border. Now, in addition to spreading not only COVID, the original COVID, but all of the mutations, I mean, these people, or some of them for sure, would end up in our hospitals. Some of them from other countries, probably with very little, if any, connection to Canada, would end up in ICU beds, taking up ventilators. You know, it makes you sad, doesn't it? I mean, the rest of us going through all of this torture, all of the impositions, all of the sadness, all of the morale busting. And in the meantime, here is the prime, don't forget the Prime Minister, with a stroke of the pen, could stop this. He should have and could have put a stop to this a long time ago. He is still, even with all of this new evidence about the thousands flooding into this country, already infected, he still does nothing. Well, there's supposed to be a ban on travel from India. How long did it take him to impose that? A little bit late. I want to, do you realize that in January of this year, there was not a single, not that we were aware of, not a single so-called UK mutation in Canada in January. We had COVID, but we didn't have this deadly UK mutation. Do you realize, ladies and gentlemen, that today the UK mutation takes up about 90%, accounts for about 90% of all new infections? How did this mutation arrive here? I said this yesterday. Did it swim? Was it carried by pigeons? Did it come on the internet? Did it suddenly crop up in Sudbury or Timmins? Did some little refinery out in Manitoba? Is that where it started? No. It came here from other nations, allowed into this country with their infections by the Prime Minister of Canada, whose responsibility is to ensure the security, health, and otherwise of our borders. If I'm saying anything that's not true here, I hope to hear from you. Well, we poor buggers, helpless. I mean, we try to keep body and soul together during this morale-destroying restrictions. Our government does virtually nothing to stop the importation, not just of COVID-19, but the much more highly contagious variations that are now taking over. It's a terrible indictment of a government which has failed us at every turn since this pandemic began. At every single turn, it has failed us. I reported back in March, and I want to tell you, but I got a lot of criticism because I was accused by a good many people of being a racist. Why? Because I reported back in March. Debbie and I arrived back from the Bahamas on March 29th, as I recall, at Pearson International Airport. This was after the government had stood in the House and claimed that health security had been greatly improved and there were all kinds of sanitary conditions at our airports, and there was nothing to worry about, that our border was secure. I reported because Debbie and I were there. We lived through it. We arrived at Pearson International Airport. We were jammed into a tiny customs room. An airplane from India had just arrived. We were shoulder to shoulder. You couldn't move. You could hardly breathe in that room. We were there for well over an hour as we tried to clear through customs. There were no sanitary arrangements. All of those computers that you have to punch and everything else, nobody was there wiping them down. There were no sanitary facilities whatsoever. There was no attempt made to explain to anybody what was going on. A good many of the people were there could not speak English. They were nodding. They had no idea what they were nodding to. We could see, and I reported this, and because it happened to be an airplane from India, I was accused of being racist. But this was, excuse me, this was happening with airplanes from all other countries, including the United States. And now we find out that despite what the Prime Minister and others are claiming, we were importing thousands of cases of infection. And small wonder. Now the Prime Minister stands in the House and beats his chest and boasts about all of the quarantine conditions. Only now we find out that all kinds of people have found loopholes around there. They're not being quarantined at all. Some of them didn't even bother going to these so-called quarantine hotels. They just buggered off. Apparently now some of them are being fined. I don't believe it for a moment. I don't think we have the means to track them down, to be honest with you. Not only that, we find out that in some cases people were quarantined. There were students, and Brian Lilly actually has got a very good column about this in The Sun today. I would urge you to read it. He interviewed a student who was quarantined. He had tested positive, so he's quarantined in a building with 12 other students. He's in the building, shoulder to shoulder, even sleeping in the same room with 4 or 5 other of these students. And these other students are free to come and go. Nobody's testing them. They're out, they're working, they're going to other classes, and obviously they're spreading. They pick up and they're spreading it. No, this is the so-called quarantine. Many of the people are coming from other countries that go into a home with large numbers of people, large families staying there. And the other people in that home, they're coming and going everywhere, rubbing shoulders, sitting down, having meals with the infected person. This is the quarantine conditions that our prime minister boasts about, and the media by and large applauds him for. You know, the prime minister boasts that we have, quote, the toughest border measures in the world. Very clearly, he's lying through his teeth. Either that or he doesn't know what the hell's going on. Take your pick. 5,000 infections arriving at our airport in 3 months doesn't sound like a tough border measure to me.
Well, I just did the math on that, Lowell. So, I mean, if we take 5,000 over 3 months that we know about,
yep,
that's 1,600 and let's call it 67 per month. Well, we've been in this hell for 13 months. That's 21,658. 22,000 people by air. There you go.
That's just by air. I mean, more people are arriving through land border locations than by air.
Yep. And
you can be sure that a good many of them are testing positive as well. But thank you for the mathematics. Anything beyond about 12, I get lost. So you're saying that by your figures, and apparently, according to Brian Lilly, and he's got some figures there that I don't have access to, he says that in fact the number of people who have infections is increasing. It's not decreasing. The number of people arriving here are increasing.
Well, I mean, that just
you're saying
that just makes sense as things get worse in India, of course.
Precisely.
Of course.
So you're saying you've done the mathematics. You say that since this pandemic began, in all probability, over 20,000 people, infected people, have arrived at our border.
Closer to 22,000, yeah.
In the airports.
That's right.
In the airports alone. I mean, small wonder. I mean, look around the world. Look to the south. I mean, the United States is opening up now. More than 40% of the American population has now received both shots, so they're fully protected. And as a consequence, they're opening up everywhere. Somebody on Facebook keeps running pictures of a beach, crowded beach in Florida, and the caption is, how come everybody is not dead in Florida? Well, the reason that there are very few people they had a bad time, but over 70% of the people in Florida have now received both shots. So that they're immune. They have herd immunity in Florida. That's why they're out in the beaches. There were 50,000 people at the Kentucky Derby the other day. Most of them not bothering wearing masks. Why? Well, because Kentucky, over 50% of the population in Kentucky has had both shots of vaccines. They've got herd immunity or very close to it. The UK, I mean, they've stopped talking about pandemic now for well over a week. It's the country, the UK is wide open. Israel's been wide open now for well over a month because they got vaccines. Meantime, here in Canada, not only do we not have nearly enough vaccines, they're just still dribbling in. The prime minister talking about, he's got a million here and a million there. It's peanuts. You know what? If in fact we had plenty of vaccines, then why would our nurses be begging for the second shot? Think of that. There's a story in the Citizen today about long delays trying to book new vaccines for some people. The 2-hour wait trying to get through. Well, why is that? Because we don't have enough. Nurses who are in the front lines and should have been vaccinated months ago, both shots, are still begging for the second shot. Some of them, because the first shot is only about 50% effective, some of them are coming down sick. Same thing happened at the Heart Institute. Why? Because we don't have enough vaccines. According to the Prime Minister, we have spent $5 billion with a B dollars on vaccines. Where the hell are they? Because I'm going to tell you, a lot of the vaccines coming in now are on loan from the United States. Got nothing to do with this so-called magic purchase made by the Prime Minister. Almost 400,000 of them we took from COVAX, which is an organization supposed to supply vaccines for third world nations. We're a third nerd when it comes to vaccines. Yeah, we're third world, worse. So while these other countries, not all of them, but most of the Western countries are now opening up, the infection rates are way, way down because they've got vaccines and pouring in vaccines. Meantime, here in Canada, it's the graft is going the other way. We're getting more and more restrictions. Alberta's having a terrible time. We know the restrictions in Ontario. Why? Because the government failed us. Not only did it not provide vaccines and still is not, providing vaccines, but it's allowing thousands of people to come into this country already infected. In some cases, we've got to put them up in our hospitals when the hospitals are so jammed that they're ferrying people all over the damn province. Okay, John, that's my rant. I'm so sick of it. I don't know about you folks, but I'm just sick of it.
I mean, I am too. Why are we importing this thing?
I mean, we're doing everything. You know what? You try to go to a church. You got 15 people in the church, and it'll all be fine. Meantime, 20,000 people or whatever it is, infected people are allowed into the country, and could be stopped. I mean, we're doing what we should. The only people who are not doing what they should are the damn federal government. Is Justin Trudeau, son of a bitch. John, you've got some emails coming.
Yeah, speaking of Alberta, of course, they had a rodeo there that people attended last week. And some texts coming in. By the way, we'd love your calls. We'd love your texts as well, 613-413-2217. This person says, Lowell, 2 weekends ago, they had a UFC event in Jacksonville, Florida. 17,000 people inside the arena. Barry chimes in to say, Lowell, there's a border walking bridge in Buffalo where people are just walking across with no quarantine, no tests.
You know what? There was something very interesting. A local tribe, native tribe in, I think it was Montana, could be wrong, one of the northern states, had about 800 vaccines left over. They had vaccinated all of their people, and there was about 800 vaccines left. And they let the people in Alberta know, and there were huge, mile-long lineups of Albertans crossing the border to get their vaccine at this native reservation in Montana. I mean, and Manitoba, I told this story the other day, Manitoba has made an arrangement where all education workers and teachers in Manitoba can get a free vaccine in North Dakota. And yet, to listen to the media, to watch the media, you still get the idea that vaccines are just pouring in. I repeat, if we have so many vaccines, if we're doing so well with this new rollout, why are nurses begging for a second shot? Why do I have to wait, or anybody, thousands, tens of thousands of us have to wait 4 months for a second shot? In the meantime, we're not fully protected. Why? Because we don't have enough vaccines. It's bullshit when he talks about bringing in all of these vaccines. 1 million is not, I told you that about 40%, I'll go to a sponsor in just a minute. Thanks, John. Mm-hmm. About 40% of the people, over 70%, almost 80% now of Americans have at least one shot, okay? Over 40% now have both shots, fully protected. What percentage of Canadians have had both shots and are fully protected? What percentage of Canada?
I think it's
40% in the United States.
I think it's 4%, isn't it, in Canada?
Not that much.
Really?
40% in the United States, about 30% in the UK, and increasing over 70% in Israel. Chile, they're supposed to be a third world nation, South America. Chile has almost 30% of its population fully vaccinated. Canada, 3%. This is almost 5 months. We started vaccinating December 14th. We're approaching 5 months now of the vaccine program. Only 3% of us have had 2 shots. 3%. India has a higher, and with all of the problems they have, a higher percentage than Canada and India have had both shots. Almost every nation you can think of, from Brazil to Morocco, they all had far more than 3%. Germany, France, Italy, etc., all of these countries. 3%. That's all, after 5 months almost. Shields. Got to get a little plug-in for Shields here, because these are good people, and right now there's a sale. Now, Shields, I'm informed, they don't have sales very often, but they have a sale right now. You can save as much as $600 on appliances. If you go to shields.ca, SCHEELS.ca, you'll see all of the product there. Not by the way, not just appliances, but furniture as well, and high-tech equipment. But appliances are what they're best known for. They've got a huge warehouse just filled with appliances, so you don't have to wait. Prices are very, very competitive, and right now there's a sale. Folks, it's local. They've been in business since 1947, the same family. Not many businesses, even including local ones that I do, can say that they have been in the same family. Grandfather, father, and now son run Shields. Great people. They do business the right way, and you'll save money. And you know what? You'll get your delivery probably within 2 or 3 days. Yes, John, we've got some more texts coming in here.
I get messages every day to your phone line, by the way, from people who thank you for referring them to Shields. They've done very, very
Good.
well. Yeah. Craig says Liberal friends are waking up. Just the other day, one of them said he appreciates Doug Ford and thinks Trudeau is an idiot. Peter says, afternoon, folks. It's because, let's be honest, Trudeau is letting new people into the country for future Trudeau votes once they can vote for the clown. Lock down the airports. What's his plan? Bring in people to kill the rest of us? Get rid of Canadian stock? Trudeau is a menace to Canadians. Tim says, while I don't agree with the anti-lockdown rallies and the actions of people like Randy Hillier, it's easy to understand why they are happening when Trudeau continues to let all of these infected visitors into the country. The only reason he won't put a stop to it is because he's getting ready to call an election and doesn't want to upset his Indian constituency in Brampton. Bob says those numbers only represent the ones we know of. Sadly, the unknown real number is much higher. Connie says, yes, Justin stopped the flights from India, but it never dawned on the fool that people would simply go to a close country and fly from there. My husband and I have been saying since the start of this pandemic to stop passenger flights in and out of all countries. Lisa says, sure, let's import more COVID. Dumbass Trudeau doesn't order enough vaccines, but keeps bringing in more disease. Mike says, meanwhile, 150,000 people are protesting in Montreal. And Peter says there are clinics being shut down because they ran out of vaccines to give to people. That's all on Trudeau's plate and his shameful minister in charge of government ordering. Some of the comments on your Facebook right now.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm glad to see so many comments relating to the topic here, because I want to tell you that the kind of information that I'm trying to share with you today, a good deal of this is being held from the public, or certainly the public is not aware of it. Brian Lilly is doing a great job. But, I mean, if you read the Ottawa Citizen today or the Globe and Mail, you'll be hard-pressed to see any figures, relating to the 5,000 figure that from Health Canada. It's available there. It should be, this should be headline news everywhere. Over 5,000 people, infected people allowed in our airports in 3 months period. That's headline news. The mutations, and it's now 90% apparently, the UK mutation is running rampant. It's much more infectious than the original one. We're not sure if even some of these vaccines are as effective against it as some of the other COVIDs. We don't, so much of this information we don't know. And by the way, when we're talking about information, we continue to get conflicting information from our health authorities. Now, some health authority agency says that, if possible, you should wait for Moderna or Pfizer. All along, they've been telling us, take the first one that's available. And now they're saying, well, maybe you should wait for Moderna and Pfizer. Jesus, Murphy, this pandemic is well over a year old now. You'd think by now they could at least get their God bless them message straight. It's just, we're being bombarded with all of this information, finding out that all along while we're doing all of this, they're importing thousands of cases, infected cases, that a good number of our hospital beds are taken up not by Canadian citizens, but from citizens abroad. Why, John, you asked a very interesting question before we went on the air. Why are these people coming here? Well, in some cases, these are Canadian citizens returning, but I would suspect that more than a few of them are people come here for free medical care. And of course, we've got foreign students, but Doug Ford has begged. He's almost down on his knees, begging the Prime Minister, stop the importation of COVID. He referred specifically to students. We're still allowing hundreds, maybe thousands of foreign students from all of these nations to come in here. And as Brian Lilly points out, in some cases, these kids come in here infected, carrying the disease. They move in with all sorts of other students who then in turn infect others. And nothing being done to stop it.
Well, that prompts another question for me then. If every student I know locally is doing online learning and can't be at the universities, why do the students need to be here to do remote learning? Can't they do that from there?
Very, very good question. Very good question. And, they're staying obviously in these group accommodations all over the place, I guess, which kind of surprises me. But I mean, it's the lackness. When Debbie and I arrived at Pearson International Airport, this was in the middle of the panic. The panic had just really started. I mean, the Prime Minister was on the air telling us to get home while we could. The threat was there. If you don't come home now, you may be stuck wherever the hell you are. So, I mean, there was panic.
I remember
There
it
was
well.
panic.
I remember it well. It was very
No,
ominous.
no attempt made whatsoever at that point with all of the panic. No attempt made. I mean, I'm going to tell you that when we left Nassau, the custom machines that are there that you had to touch and so forth and fill out your information, they had a woman there. There was a person who every time somebody touched it, went through, she would take the sanitary thing and wipe it all down. In Nassau, the Bahamas. In Mexico, they were doing the same thing. Apparently, there were dozens of people wiping down every time. Well, there was no attempt to make, and here we are in Canada being told that all of these new restrictions are in place. There was nothing on the intercom in any language informing people what they had to do. There was no place that people would learn that they're supposed to. This was a period when you're supposed to self-quarantine, as if. Well, I mean, that's how lax it was. And just days before, someone from the government, Trudeau's government, had stood up and claimed that they're really tightened down. It was a lie. But we're paying. Who's paying the price today? It's us, you and me, John, and people who are listening now. We're paying the price. We can't go to our relatives' funerals, for God's sake. We can't go to our church. We can't go to a restaurant. We can't play golf. We can't play pickleball. Meantime, thousands of people are flooding the country, infected, taking up our hospital beds, among other things. Yes, John.
May I ask what pickleball is before I get to some comments?
Oh, that pickleball's taking over from tennis. This is tennis for old folks.
Oh, okay. I'd not heard that. I will Google later.
It's a great sport, actually. It's you can put a lot more pickleball courts in a tennis court. A lot of tennis courts in this city are being converted to pickleball courts.
I did not know that. See?
Yeah.
See? Even I learned something
It's
on the
kind
Lowell Green
of
show.
it's kind of a sort of almost like a big ping pong sort of thing.
Okay.
With a foosball that we use. Anyway.
Oh, I like it. All right. Well, Mark says, how much is the mainstream media getting paid to boost about Trudeau and the Liberal government during the pandemic? If a media person badmouths the federal government, they lose their job. Government controls. C10 just adds to the controls. Tim says, why aren't these numbers making the headlines? Media bailout? Jerry says, it baffles me why Canadians are just sitting there and putting up with Trudeau and his incompetence, and the mainstream media is covering for him. Connie says, but Doug Ford will get the blame for the pandemic, not Trudeau. Kevin says the pandemic is the best thing that could have happened for Trudeau. He's on TV every day with free advertising, mostly CBC and CTV, and a chance to spend billions without any opposition. The longer the pandemic goes on, the better for him and his bobblehead minions. This is planned.
Actually, he's got a good point. We're running out of time. I've got to get a word in here for Centennial Glass, my other sponsor.
Yes, sir.
And once again, I want to thank. It's hard to find sponsors for a program like mine. Why? Well, because you can be sure that if you sponsor a program featuring Lowell Green, that you're going to get all kinds of people. The unions and others will phone to complain, threaten, a backlash, and threaten boycotts and so forth. So I just want to those sponsors that are dare sponsor me. They've got a lot of courage. It's actually it's good for their business. They do a lot of business, but I'm going to tell you, they take a lot of flack too. So I want to thank Centennial Glass. Centennial Glass has been with me for many years. God bless you. They're a great company. I've used them on more than one occasion here in an emergency. If it's glass of any kind, folks, they've got good people, honest prices, and great product. Centennial Glass. Now, before I go, I have a brief other topic here. My federal member of parliament for Canada is a woman named Karen McCrimmon, who last week, entirely on her own, unknown that this was going to happen, abruptly, on her own volition, shut down the Defense Committee meeting trying to get to the bottom of the General Vance scandal. Many people keep telling me what a nice woman Karen McCrimmon is. But I just want to say this. This is the woman who sat idly by, didn't utter a peep when her good friend and work colleague, Jody Wilson-Raybould had her reputation smeared, dragged through the mud, lied about, and finally booted from the party. Karen McCrimmon, fellow liberal, did absolutely nothing. Never raised her voice in defense of her friend and colleague. She lost a lot of my respect there. And now, entirely on her own, Karen McCrimmon was in the military, the Canadian military, for a while. I don't know what her role was, but she was in the military. So we have a defense committee, of all party committee, trying to get to the bottom of it. Okay, how bad is it? Who's responsible? Et cetera, what happened with General Vance, et cetera. And she shuts the whole thing down before it even started. Karen McCrimmon, some nice lady, right? Some nice lady. People who won't stand by their friends and colleagues, allow their friend's name to be dragged through the mud, lied about, and won't speak up on their behalf, got no respect for me, and I sure as hell won't have a vote for me, believe me. Karen McCrimmon, yeah, nice lady, all right, shuts down an inquiry. Just as they've shut down almost every other, they shut down the inquiry into they shut down the inquiry into Lavalin. It just goes on and on and on. John, we have a couple more emails before I go here.
We do, actually. Rob in Carlton Place says, I was speaking with a nurse from Carlton Place Hospital the other day. I was surprised to hear her say she'd only received one shot and has to wait 4 months for the second. I would have gladly given up my one shot to give her a second shot. This country is ready to re-elect this government. It's shocking how little we expect from our governments now. And just to follow up on Bill C-10, we did receive a copy of the email that Chandra Aria did send to one of your listeners. Did you want me to read that letter or save that for your next show?
Let's do it. Let's do it tomorrow. He won't. He refuses to talk with me. He won't even have his office text me. Some of these people, you know what? My grandfather used to have an expression, as useless as tits on a boar. Well, thank you all. We'll be back.
Lowell Green, live on blasttheradio.com. Show info and links at blasttheradio.com/Lowell Green. Can't join us live? Subscribe to the Lowell Green podcast. Available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and more. Or ask your smart speaker to play the Lowell Green podcast. Join us live, weekdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on Blast the Radio.